Welcome back to the Burnett Breakdown, where I, Hunter Burnett, keep up with the news so that you don't have to. This week, I'm going to be talking all about the GOP primary debate. All right, so the GOP primary debate happened this week, as many of you probably know, and the biggest elephant in the room was not there, in Donald Trump, and so Wednesday, the day of the debate, I wrote a newsletter kind of previewing the debate, and in that newsletter, I mentioned that debates are like my Super Bowl. I love debates. I love political debates. A lot of people find them insufferable. I absolutely love them. I think they're enjoyable to watch. I like most of the time there's substance. And I was actually happy that Donald Trump was not going to participate because I find any debate that Donald Trump participates immediately is a worse viewing experience because the politicians decide to start name calling and Donald Trump kind of consumes all the attention, and there's absolutely no substance. And in fact, I was pleasantly surprised that this debate, of the substance that was there. Now, you have the name calling, you had the kind of vague, robotic, rehearsed answers that didn't actually contain any substance, but I thought in this debate that there was actually some real substantive disagreement between the candidates, and I'll mention, we'll go through some of those clips together, but even candidates that largely agree with one another, like Mike Pence and Nikki Haley at one point, arguing about abortion and how to approach abortion. So I thought this was a phenomenal debate in terms of just the substance there. It obviously could be better, but after the debates that we've seen in the past, I thought this was phenomenal. So now just my big picture thoughts on the debate, and then I want to go through some debate clips, react, and just give my thoughts on those. So big picture debates, or big picture thoughts on the debate. Nikki Haley, I thought Nikki Haley did phenomenal. I thought she was by far the best. I thought she did the best for herself. She packed a ton of substance into her. She didn't have the most time, but she packed substance into the time that she did had. She decided to talk to GOP voters as adults. She didn't sugarcoat the truth about spending, about the practicality of abortion policy. She got into just a little more specific detail, though not nearly as specific as I would like. She got into a little more specific detail than the others on education. I think she gave a realistic foreign policy picture regarding Ukraine. I thought she did phenomenal. She was composed. She seemed tough. She was not rambunctious or obnoxious in any way. I thought she did phenomenal. Mike Pence, I thought Pence did well as well, but I just didn't love how aggressively he would talk. He would speak over others and the moderators. His answers were solid. I think Mike Pence on substance is phenomenal. I do think that the way he approached it probably did him some favors with some, but I just hate that kind of approach. And I do think that he showed GOP voters why they used to like him, right? He used to be very popular amongst, especially the more religious conservative base of the Republican Party, and now he's despised. But I think this debate, for the more open-minded people, hopefully made them see, oh yeah, that's why I used to like him. Ron DeSantis, I know that some thought that Ron DeSantis did fine, if not well, but I was not impressed with DeSantis. I thought everything that he said seemed robotic. I thought he seemed indecisive in many regards. His answers, I thought, very frequently lacked substance. But I've also never been impressed with DeSantis like others have. I thought he's done fine. I thought he was a really good governor for the state of Florida until his last year when he decided to embark on more culture war issues. But I've never had this, he's the next one in the Republican Party like others have. I've just never seen that. Vivek Ramaswamy, I left this debate with more just annoyance and antipathy towards Ramaswamy than I could have ever imagined. I think he lacks any substance whatsoever. I think he sounds confident and he sounds smooth when he says stuff, so people buy into it. But I don't think there is any substance to almost anything that he's saying. I think he's naive. I think it shows. I think his foreign policy, which again, I know I'm biased against to begin with because I am more hawkish, but I think he just has no idea how the world is going to work. He is naive and idealistic in a way that, very much so reminds me of Barack Obama. I know Chris Christie called him out on copying Barack Obama, and he even did it later in the debate as well, hearkening back to Obama, and I could not stand Obama. I thought Obama was nothing but bunch of cliches with no actual substance. And the substance that was there, I disagreed with. I think that is Ramaswamy to a T. So I just left this debate just with more antipathy towards him than I could ever imagine. And then finally, Tim Scott. I'm not even going to talk about the others. Tim Scott, I thought just did awful. I liked Tim Scott. I thought before this debate that Tim Scott was one of the only other ones. I thought it was going to be Trump, DeSantis, or Scott were the only ones with a real shot to win the nomination, with Trump like heavily favored. I just don't think that's the case anymore. I think if anything, Haley took over that spot. I like Tim Scott. If it were up to me, Tim Scott would be vice president or something like that. I really think Tim Scott is solid, but he just did awful. He disappeared. He wasn't there. He just said nothing memorable. Almost everything he said was, politician speak. He gave very little substance about anything. He talked about his biography, but his biography doesn't actually translate into policy. So how does your biography influence your policy, and what are those policies? Didn't talk about it. And granted, the debate format doesn't do him any favors. He's a happy warrior, as people call him, right? He's optimistic. He's nice. He really is likable. And that just doesn't bode well in a debate where you're meant to go after others. And I think he was trying to be the above the fray adult in the room, but instead he just came across as nobody. I mean, just did not do anything to stand out. So now I want to play some clips and respond to these clips. And these are the clips that, as I was watching the debate, I took notes on my phone and took timestamps of these clips, because as soon as they happened, I thought, I want to respond to that. And so that's what we're going to do now. And we'll start with what I thought was one of the best moments of the debate, of Nikki Haley's, I would argue, her career, when she goes on to blame Republicans and Democrats for the national debt, which I think she was just absolutely right in. So here's that clip now.
So why are you better positioned to turn around this economy that we've heard all of these voters talking about tonight than Mr. Ramaswamy, who is a successful entrepreneur nationally right now? He's beating you in the polls.
Well, I don't care about polls. What I care about, the fact is that no one is telling the American people the truth. The truth is that Biden didn't do this to us. Our Republicans did this to us, too. When they passed that $2.2 trillion COVID stimulus bill, they left us with 90 million people on Medicaid, 42 million people on food stamps. No one has told you how to fix it. I'll tell you how to fix it. They need to stop the spending. They need to stop the borrowing. They need to eliminate the earmarks that the Republicans brought back in. And they need to make sure they understand these are taxpayer dollars. It's not their dollars. And while they're all saying this, you have Ron DeSantis, you've got Tim Scott, you've got Mike Pence. They all voted to raise the debt. And Donald Trump added $8 trillion to our debt. And our kids are never going to forgive us for this. And so at the end of the day, you look at the 2024 budget, Republicans asked for $7.4 billion in earmarks. Democrats asked for $2.8 billion. So you tell me who are the big spenders. I think it's time for an accountant in the White House.
I mean, come on. That is what the kids say are straight facts right there. She mentioned entitlements, which no Republicans want to talk about entitlements these days. If they all talk about spending, and they only talk about spending when Democratic presidents are in the office, because God forbid we talk about spending when our own Republican president is in the office. So, but even if when they talk about spending now, they talk about nonsense that won't have any actual impact on the budget. They talk about things like Ukraine, and all the money we spend to Ukraine. Meanwhile, we're in debt. Yeah, the money we spend to Ukraine compared to our national debt is minuscule. Or they talk about waste and fraud and these dumb little programs. Yeah, waste and fraud. Get rid of them. Minuscule compared to our national budget. What takes up our national budget? Entitlements. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. Those are what is the vast majority of our budget, and they are all mandatory, meaning that every year they automatically are added into the budget. So until we reform entitlements, until we reform Social Security, we will never get our national debt in order. We won't. And it's been this way under Democratic presidents and Republican presidents. Neither party cares about fiscal conservatism. Republicans will claim they do when a Democrat is in office, but nobody actually does. And so thank God for Nikki Haley saying, everyone's talking about spending, and she points out to the people on the stage and says they voted to raise the debt ceiling. So they claim to care about spending, they don't. Okay? This is talking to the American people as if they're adults. Hey, guess what? We don't have an unlimited budget, and guess what? The things that are contributing to our budget are entitlements. Now, I wish she had gone after the entitlements a little bit more, talk about Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid in more detail about how she plans to reform that, but even still, mentioning entitlements, that is what's to blame, and that Republicans, especially under Donald Trump, have been just as in favor of Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid than Democrats. In fact, Trump famously said, I'm not going to touch your Social Security. Okay, then we can't be surprised that the national debt continues to rise. And don't tell me you care about fiscal conservatism if you don't mention entitlements. So I thought that was a phenomenal answer by Nikki Haley, and thank God there's finally someone in the Republican Party talking about fiscal conservatism, not just when a Democratic politician is in office, but talking about it and blaming Republicans as well. Now, granted, she didn't really do that in the first 2 years when she was in the Trump administration, but I'm glad she's saying it now. So the second clip that I want to play here is Vivek Ramaswamy saying what I believe to be one of, if not the most anti-conservative thing that you could possibly say. Here's that clip.
The real choice we face in this primary is this. Do you want a super PAC puppet, or do you want a patriot who speaks the truth? Do you want incremental reform, which is what you're hearing about, or do you want revolution?
Okay.
And I stand on the side of the American revolution.
We're going to take control back.
Excuse me, what? What it means to be conservative is to believe in incremental change. That's by definition what conservatives believe. Because we want to conserve the existing social order, the existing institutions. The very opposite of conservatism is revolution, is to upend and overthrow everything. And there at the end, he says, I'm for the American Revolution. That's exactly what conservatives are seeking to conserve. We want to conserve the principles and the ideals and the government and the institutions of the American founding, of the American Revolution. That's what conservatives are seeking to conserve. And here you are saying, do you want incremental reform? Yes, because the government never knows what it's doing. The government sucks at everything. So do we think that Ramaswamy is going to get in there as president, give him all the power, which I don't want to give to the government to begin with, and then all of a sudden he's going to start this revolution to change everything, and that because he's so smart and intelligent, he's going to know how to make this country a utopia? That is progressivism to its T. And fine, I don't know if Ramaswamy considers himself conservative or Republican, but I consider myself a conservative. So yes, sign me up for incremental reform instead of revolution. Because unfortunately, revolution leads to things like the French Revolution. Hence why Edmund Burke, on his reflections on the revolution in France, gets considered the founding of modern conservatism. Because he was anti-revolution. I mean, so unconservative. It's unfathomable. So again, maybe he's Republican, maybe other Republicans agree with him. That's fine. If that's the case, I'm not Republican because I am conservative to a T. I want incremental change and reform because I don't trust government officials with revolution. I just don't. So, moving on, because I'm going to get worked up again. Next clip I thought was a just substantive, interesting, fascinating argument between Nikki Haley and Mike Pence on abortion. And so you're going to see this back and forth here, but watch here.
So, Governor Haley, what do you say to your party and to your state, which today confirmed a 6-week abortion law as well, especially the impact on women suburban voters across this country?
Thank you, Martha. I am unapologetically pro-life, not because the Republican Party tells me to be, but because my husband was adopted and I had trouble having both of my children, so I'm surrounded by blessings. Having said that, we need to stop demonizing this issue. This is talking about the fact that unelected justices didn't need to decide something this personal, because it's personal for every woman and man. Now it's been put in the hands of the people. That's great. When it comes to a federal ban, let's be honest with the American people and say it will take 60 Senate votes. It will take a majority of the House. So in order to do that, let's find consensus. Can't we all agree that we should ban late-term abortions? Can't we all agree that we should encourage adoptions? Can't we all agree that doctors and nurses who don't believe in abortion shouldn't have to perform them? Can't we all agree that contraception should be available? And can't we all agree that we are not going to put a woman in jail or give her the death penalty if she gets an abortion? Let's treat this like a respectful issue that it is and humanize the situation and stop demonizing the situation.
I'm not new to this cause. After I gave my life to Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior, I opened up the book and I read, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. And see, I set before you life and death, blessings and curses. Now choose life." And I knew from that moment on, the cause of life had to be my cause. And I've been a champion for life in the Congress, a champion for life as governor and as vice president. And to be honest with you, Nikki, you're my friend, but consensus is the opposite of leadership. When the Supreme Court returned this question to the American people, they didn't just send it to the states only. It's not a states-only issue, it's a moral issue. And I promise you, as President of the United States, the American people will have a champion for life in the Oval Office. Can't we have a minimum standard in every state in the nation that says when a baby is capable of feeling pain, an abortion cannot be allowed? A 15-week ban is an idea whose time has come. It's supported by 70% of the American people, but it's going to take unapologetic leadership that stands on principle and expresses compassion for women in crisis pregnancies. I'll do that as President of the United States.
So first of all, I will say it is in the hands of the people, and that's where it should be. But when you're talking about a federal ban, be honest with the American people. We haven't had 45 pro-life senators in over 100 years. So no Republican president can ban abortions any more than a Democrat president could ban all those state laws. Don't make women feel like they have to decide on this issue when you know we don't have 60 Senate votes in the House.
70% of the American people support legislation to ban abortion after a baby is capable.
So again, I think that is just an utterly fascinating debate. It's addressing an issue that Republicans are really having to deal with. How do we deal with abortion? For the longest time, it's been anti-Roe v. Wade. We want to overturn Roe v. Wade. Guess what? You did. Now what? And here, what you have here is Haley, who is saying we have to build consensus. We have to stop making this the issue that people have to decide on. Now, whether you agree with her or not doesn't matter, right? Well, it does ultimately matter, but that's not my point here. That's what she's arguing. Build consensus. And now I will say I do hate the naive platitude of we have to stop dehumanizing the issue. How? Like, who's dehumanizing it? No one's saying if you have an abortion, you're an animal. They're saying they disagree with abortion. So I hate that. But nonetheless, she does want to build consensus. And another critique is she's like, can't we all agree? And can't we all agree that contraceptives should be available? Well, no, I'm sure there's Catholics that actually disagree with that. So it just, can't we all agree? Well, no. That's actually why we're having the argument. But she's focused on the practicalities. We need practical policy debate. And then Mike Pence comes in and says, no, this is a moral issue. It's a deep moral issue. We need to build not just build a consensus. That's the opposite of leadership, which I disagree with. Sometimes leaders build consensus, but what we need is a federal ban. This is a moral issue, and we should fight for this federal ban. And Nikki Haley says, but we can't. Great. As president, you say you'll be a champion of life, but guess what? You can't do anything about it. So stop telling voters that they have to vote on this issue, because you can't do, as president, anything about it. You don't have the votes to do anything about it. And I love that the little the remark that Pence says about 70% of people say this is what Americans do all the time. Or Democrats do all the time with Americans. Universal health care is supported by 65% of Americans. Okay, based on what poll? And B, how was the question asked? Do they actually believe that? Now ask what the trade-offs are and whether they still want to agree with that. There's a reason we don't do policy based on what the majority of people in the United States believe based on a poll. That's a terrible way to do policy. And Nikki Haley's like, great, 70%. 70% of senators do not believe that. And guess what? We need the Senate to pass a bill. Spoiler, you're not going to get that. And so I think this debate is fascinating. It's one that Republicans are going to have to deal with. And what they're going to end up on more on Pence's side, Haley's side, or somewhere in the middle. But I just thought this was a really substantive debate that was worth pointing out. Moving on to next clip is another Vivek clip with he mentions national identity, which is one of my least favorite things that politicians can do. So here's Vivek's national identity comment.
We're in the middle of a national identity crisis. And I say this as a member of my generation. The problem in our country right now, the reason we have that mental health epidemic, is that people are so hungry for purpose and meaning at a time when family, faith, patriotism, hard work have all disappeared. What we really need is a tonal reset from the top, saying that this is what it means to be an American. Yes, we will stand for the rule of law. Yes, we will close the southern border where criminals are coming in every day. And yes, we will back law enforcement because we remember who we really are. And that's also how we address that mental health epidemic in the next generation that is directly leading to violent crime across this country.
All right, so national identity crisis that the United States has. And what do we need to fix this national identity crisis? We need to elect Vivek Ramaswamy to, quote, have a tonal reset from the top. A tonal reset. So we need to change the way that the president speaks and what the president says. And then all of a sudden, we're going to all remember collectively, 330 million Americans, what it means to be an American. Because Ramaswamy is going to institute a tonal reset from the top. What? Excuse me? What sense does that actually make? If you think there's a national identity crisis, we don't know the kind of people we are, what is one man saying stuff going to do? Answer, nothing. He can't do anything. This is an idolatry of the office of the president, saying that the president can fix everything. This was so bad during the Trump era. I am the only man. He's still saying, I am the only man. Okay, if one man can fix the world, the country, that man is God. Okay? None of these people are God. None of these people are Jesus Christ. They can't really solve a deep-rooted issue of people's faith. They can't. They won't, but they'll promise it. So that's just utter nonsense. And all of a sudden, these changes in policy, that's what's going to help us build a national identity. It's nonsense. It makes no sense. Do you really think one person being elected president can all of a sudden instill a national identity in 330 million people? Like, it's absurd. It's not going to happen. And politicians it's harmful for politicians to claim to be able to do that. So Mike Pence is not going to let this comment go unaddressed, and he's going to respond. So here's Mike Pence's response.
We don't have an identity crisis, Vivek. We're not looking for a new national identity. The American people are the most faith-filled, freedom-loving, idealistic, hardworking people the world has ever known. We just need government as good as our people.
Well, Mike, I think the difference is you might have, some others like you may have on the stage, it's Morning in America speech. It is not Morning in America. We live in a dark moment, and we have to confront the fact that we're in an internal, sort of cold cultural civil war.
You are
and we have to
equating the
recognize
American
that
people with the failed
win.
government in Washington, D.C. We just need government as good as our people again.
So the reason why I wanted to put this whole back and forth in here is because this is such a deep, deep, deep disagreement in the Republican Party right now. How bad off is our country, right? You heard Vivek respond with, some like you and others on the stage may have a Morning in America speech. But we live in a dark time. Every time in American history you can see as a dark time. Do you think the 70s, the 60s, the 50s, the 1860s, the 1820s, did you really think that was the golden era of American history? Like, there's challenges in every era, in every generation, there's challenges. How do we overcome those challenges? We don't overcome those challenges by emphasizing and focusing on the challenge and how unbearable and how awful the current moment is. Maybe this is why we have a mental health issue in this country, as Vivek was mentioning in the other clip. I don't actually think that's true, but imagine telling an entire generation of people, generation after generation after generation, this world sucks, the country sucks, everything about your world sucks, you're living in the darkest time in American history, and you're never going to succeed in the future. Guess what they think? Their world sucks, their life sucks, and everything sucks, so who cares? Like, this idea that we live in this darkest moment in American history is absurd because, okay, 4 years ago, when the great man himself, Donnie T, was president, was that a dark time in American history? No, because as we'll see in a second, he was the greatest president of the 21st century. So in 3 years, we went from the glory days of America to a dark moment in American history. What? Then if that's true, then the American people and the American system is screwed. If it takes 1 3-year period to ruin the country, to create a dark cloud on everything. If that's true, we're screwed. We can't survive. And so you have Mike Pence saying, what are you talking about? The American people are idealistic people. They're people who believe in certain good things, such as life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, such as limited government, separation of powers, caring for one another, Judeo-Christian values. You can say that those are on the decline, and they are, but to say that, that's going to be the reason why we have a decline. That's going to be the reason that we have a dark moment in American history, but that's not going to happen overnight. And we're going to see and later on, Martha McCallum is going to answer a great question. Okay, if faith's declining, what do we do about it? And what Pence is saying here of basically, we need government to get out of American lives so that Americans can live good lives. That's what we need. And I would add, we need to stop idolizing our leaders and thinking our leaders are going to come in and save the day, as Ramaswamy said earlier. They're not going to save the day. And if we rely and bank on politicians coming in and saving the day, they're the last great hope of America, we're screwed. Because guess what? They're not going to be God. They're not going to be Jesus. They're going to fail. And does that mean our country fails as well? No. Turns out our country is a resilient country, and the ideals of America in particular are good, and we need a government that upholds those ideals that the American people way back in 1789, that they wrote down and enshrined in the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. That's what we need, a government that reflects those ideals, that reflects the ideals of the American people, not a government that continues to tell everybody how bad everything is. So, Chris Christie is going to first mention on the podcast, but Chris Christie is going to just have I think, an objectively true statement. So here that one is.
Look, here's the bottom line. Someone's got to stop normalizing this conduct. Okay? Now whether or not you believe that the criminal charges are right or wrong, the conduct is beneath the office of President of the United States.
What's incorrect about that? I fail to see what is incorrect about that. I fail to see what people were booing. I heard one internet commentator, Candace Owens, talking about basically twisting Christie's words and saying he believes that just because he doesn't like Trump, that the justice system should come after him. That's not what he said there. He said regardless of the criminal charges, okay, regardless of whether you think the criminal charges should stick or shouldn't stick, the underlying conduct of Donald Trump as president, post-presidency, during the post-election nonsense of claiming the election was stolen, is pathetic, immoral, and should be condemned. It doesn't have to be criminal, But how you can look at that behavior, the lies that were told, the complete disregard for the Constitution, saying that he was essentially going to get rid of the Constitution because the times called for it, the undermining of the elections in the United States, going out of his way to find lawyers to tell him what he wanted to hear and give him legal theories, quote-unquote legal theories, that justified him staying in power, even though the American people had voted him out. That is immoral behavior. That's what that is. Like, let's call it what it is. And so, what does he say here that's wrong? You could not like Chris Christie. I don't care for him a whole lot. But what is wrong? What is a lie? The conduct is unbecoming of and beneath the conduct of the President of the United States. That's just true, I think. But apparently people think that Trump's conduct is just good and gold all the time. In fact, Vivek Ramaswamy was one of those people. So here's a clip of him saying Trump was the greatest president of the 21st century.
President Trump, I believe, was the best president of the 21st century. It's a fact.
Then why are you running against him? Why are you running against the best president of the 21st century? Don't you want that again? And what do you have to offer that he doesn't if he was the best? Turns out we have the opportunity to have the best again. So why don't you want the best again? It's because he's not running for president. He's running to be vice president, or he's running to be in the cabinet. And he's running for popularity. He's not actually running for president. You don't say that if you're running for president. You just don't. Okay? You say that if you're pandering. And that's what he is. He's pandering. And I love I think Donald Trump was the best president of the 21st century. That's a fact. So I think, therefore, it's a fact. Yeah, that makes sense. Also, let's think about the 21st century. We've had 4 presidents. I guess maybe you can count Clinton. Okay, so Clinton, Bush, Obama, Trump, Biden. 3 of those 5 were Democrats. He would never say that they were the best president. So now you're talking about 2 people, Bush or Trump. Like, he makes this grand statement as if it's, in any way meaningful. Okay, you're saying you like Trump better than Bush, basically. Cool. Like, just, again, pandering nonsense. But here we are with Vivek. And he would continue. So here's Vivek talking about the Chinese-Russia alliance being single greatest threat to the United States, making an ugly comment about Zelensky, comparing him to people's pope. This is just his thoughts on Ukraine.
Mr. Ramaswamy, you would not support an increase of funding to Ukraine?
I would not. And I think that this is disastrous, that we are protecting against an invasion across somebody else's border when we should use those same military resources to prevent across the invasion of our own southern border here in the United States of America. We are driving Russia further into China's hands. The Russia-China alliance is the single greatest threat we face. And I find it offensive that we have professional politicians on the stage that will make a pilgrimage to Kyiv, to their Pope, Zelensky, without doing the same thing for people in Maui or the south side of Chicago or Kensington. I think that we have to put the interests of Americans first, secure our own border instead of somebody else's. And the reality is, this is also how we project strength by making America strong at home.
The utter ignorance on world affairs is staggering, truly. You can disagree with funding Ukraine. Okay, we can have that argument. You can be more isolationist than I am. A lot of people are. That's fine. We can have that argument. But to say that the single greatest threat to the United States is the Chinese-Russian alliance, and that it is the funding of Ukraine that is driving Russia into the hands of China, you just have to be ignorant. The Chinese-Russian alliance has been developing for years. They had an alliance before Russia invaded Ukraine. The 2 countries want to remake and recreate a world order that does not have the United States leading it. They've been upfront about this. Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin may not like each other as personal friends. It doesn't matter. They see each other as allies. And they have for years. For years they have. In fact, it's why Russia thought they could invade Ukraine to begin with. because they knew that they could kind of, uphold their economy if things came to economic sanctions, that China and Chinese consumption and Chinese purchasing of Russian goods could help their support their economy while they invaded Ukraine. The idea that if we stop funding Ukraine, meaning that Russia wins the war in Ukraine because they have more funding, larger military, better military technology, that if we stop sending aid to Ukraine and Russia ends up winning the war, that somehow that means Russia and China are going to be further apart. Make that make sense. I mean, please make that make sense. And his whole ugly comment about people making a pilgrimage to the Pope Zelensky. So now you're comparing Zelensky to the Pope. Like, how Catholics don't see that and say, excuse me? Like, whether they're for or against the Ukrainian aid, to make that comparison is heretical. It's got to be heretical. I'm not a Catholic, so I'm not sure on the theology there, but it's got to be heretical. So you're offending Catholics in the United States because you want to take a shot. I mean, come on. It's just painful to listen to. It really is. And then finally, his last comment there. We project strength by making us strong at home. Okay, so again, by taking Ukrainian aid and letting Russia invade Ukraine and take it over shows the United States is really strong. I mean, come on. Seriously? By withdrawing, we project strength because Putin's not going to mess with us then. Like, this is such a naive way of looking at the world. Vladimir Putin isn't going to see our withdrawal of Ukrainian aid and say, wow, the United States is really strong, don't want to mess with them. Like, this is so naive. I just think it's plain dumb. I think he's ignorant. It sounds great, but it just doesn't make any logical sense. So, again, Mike Pence not having it, and Mike Pence responds.
Well, let me be clear. Anybody that thinks that we can't solve the problems here in the United States and be the leader of the free world has a pretty small view of the greatest nation on earth.
That is incorrect.
We can do both, Vivek. We've done both. We've been the leader of the free world and the arsenal of democracy for years. The Reagan Doctrine years ago made it clear. We said, if you're willing to fight the communists on your soil, we'll give you the means to fight them there so our troops don't have to fight them. Vivek, if we do the giveaway that you want to give to Putin to give him his land, it's not going to be too long before he rolls across a NATO border, and frankly, our men and women of our armed forces are going to have to go and fight him. I want to let the Ukrainians fight and drive Putin and the Russians back out into Russia.
I want to just briefly address Pence, Vice President Pence.
I mean, I just think Mike Pence, again, is right. Mike Pence is calling Vivek out on his appeasement. I mean, the Reagan Doctrine, the idea that, if we don't stop communism, again, not us sending troops, and I'll get to that in a second because DeSantis is going to say he's not going to send troops, as if anyone is saying, hey, let's send troops to Ukraine. So by not sending troops, we're just letting people fight Russia. Again, our enemy, our adversary. We're letting the Ukrainians fight them so that we don't have to fight them. Because again, do you think that Putin is going to stop? I mean, this is appeasement. What Vivek is talking about is appeasement. Oh, Hitler will stop after Austria. Oh, Hitler will stop after the Sudetenland. Oh, Hitler will stop after Czechoslovakia. Oh, wait, turns out he won't. Like, okay, yeah, Putin will stop after Georgia. Putin will stop after Crimea. Putin will stop after Ukraine. Okay. Like, let's read a history book. Well, Vivek is going to respond to this.
The real threat we face today is communist China. and we are driving Russia further into China's arms. The Russia-China military alliance is the single greatest threat we face. Okay. Nobody in either political party is talking about it. The reality is that today, Ukraine is not a priority for the United States of America. And I think that the same people who took us into the Iraq War, the same people who took us into the Vietnam War, you cannot start another no-win war. And I do not want to get to the point where we're sending our military resources abroad when we could be better using them here at home to protect our own borders, protect the homeland.
All right.
So there, again, just in my opinion, appeasement to a T. And I love the Chinese-Russian alliance is the single greatest threat that no one in either political party is talking about. No one is talking about it. That's all foreign policy experts talk about, is communist China, is the relationship between Russia and China. Like, this isn't profound stuff. We have disagreements on how to handle that alliance. You think, Vivek, that the way to handle that alliance, the way to make that alliance weaker, is to withdraw aid from Ukraine, because that'll make us stronger at home, and that'll somehow send a message to Putin that we're strong at home. Pence thinks, no, the way that we address that alliance is to continue funding Ukraine to fight the war effort against Russia, to show Russia and China, you can't invade sovereign countries. We're going to do something about it. And again, notice, he doesn't want to start another no-win war. No one wants to start a no-win war. No one. Do you really think that Pence is going to get to be president and say, you know what we're going to do? We're going to start another one of those no-win wars, baby. Let's go. I mean, come on. No one says that. We have different perspectives on what we think most likely leads to war. He thinks funding the Ukrainians most likely leads to war. I don't think so. I think withdrawing, empowering Putin to take Ukraine, and encouraging him to maybe try his luck again encourages war more. We have a disagreement, but let's not say that this is just no-win war. And I love his comment about the same people who brought us into Iraq. Okay, if you think that's no-win war, okay. And Vietnam. I remember those days when Mike Pence was leading the charge in Vietnam, or Nikki Haley was leading the charge in Vietnam. Yeah, I remember those days because they were alive and kicking around and leading the free world in Vietnam. I mean, come on. Like, if you're comparing us supporting Ukraine to Vietnam, like, again, just utter nonsense. It doesn't make any sense, but people and isolationists will probably like it. All right, so again, isolationism continues with DeSantis.
Your first obligation is to defend our country and its people. And that means you're sending all this money, but you're not doing what we need to do to secure our own border. We have tens of thousands of people who are being killed because we're not handling both. And so I am going to declare it a national emergency. I'm not going to send troops to Ukraine, but I am going to send them to our southern border. When these drug pushers are bringing fentanyl across the border, that's going to be the last thing they do. We're going to use force, and we're going to leave them stone cold dead.
So DeSantis says what everyone else says. We're not going to send troops to Ukraine. Again, no one is claiming to send troops to Ukraine, to want to send troops to Ukraine. So thank God DeSantis is not going to send troops to Ukraine, because I was worried that someone else who's not claiming that would. And this whole idea is, and this is actually a substantive disagreement. Do you think we can do both? Right? Haley says we can do both. We can protect our border and we can help support Ukraine. DeSantis says, well, we're not doing both. That's a substantive disagreement, right? Can we do both? Practically, can we? I think we can, but I know plenty of smart people who don't. They don't actually think it's realistic. Okay, that's a substantive disagreement. But can we get rid of this whole idea that, like, the other side wants to send troops to Ukraine? I mean, it just is so, no one is claiming that. Okay? No one is claiming they want to send troops to Ukraine. And even DeSantis saying he'll send federal troops to the southern border. To do what? I mean, the immigrants coming across the border aren't just cartels. What do you do with the illegal immigrants that aren't members of the cartel? You're going to leave them stone cold dead too? Because that's the most inhumane policy imaginable. Like, I agree with funding a border wall, with protecting the border. But the reason why we haven't done that is because Congress won't agree, won't compromise, won't get it done. The president has so limited power in our immigration system. Like, they can't just send federal troops to go shoot down everyone who crosses the border. That's not going to happen. Like, you can't do that. So how do we actually fix our immigration system? This isn't an answer, okay? Our Ukrainian aid has nothing to do with our Congress not actually providing the funds necessary to go towards the immigration system and to fix the immigration system and to fix the immigration laws. We could bring back all our funds from Ukraine. Do we think Congress is going to act? No, because they haven't. Both sides likes the issue too much. They like running on the issue, so they're not going to fix the issue. So the president's not going to be able to do anything about it. So I just think this is incoherent to say the reason why our border is not protected is because we're sending money to Ukraine. Okay, then why wasn't it protected during the Trump administration? Why did we not get any sort of immigration reform during the Trump administration? We weren't involved in Ukraine. He's the only president, right, to not have, to not start another no-win war. Then why didn't we fix the border then? Because it's more than just we're sending money to Ukraine. It's just a false equivalence. Now, DeSantis apparently is going to be hawkish, though, on the cartels in Mexico. And here's a clip of him saying that he would send troops across the border.
Let's go to Governor DeSantis. So as president, would you support sending U.S. Special Forces over the border into Mexico to take out fentanyl labs, to take out drug cartel operations? Would you support that kind of American military use?
Yes, and I will do it on day one. Here's the thing. The cartels are killing tens of thousands of our fellow citizens. You want to talk about a country in decline? You have the cartels controlling a lot of part of your southern border. We have to reestablish the rule of law, and we have to defend our people. The President of the United States has got to use all available powers as Commander-in-Chief to protect our country and to protect the people. So when they're coming across, yes, we're going to use lethal force. Yes, we reserve the right to operate. How many more tens of thousands are we going to let to die? I am sick. I've met angel moms throughout this country. I met a lady in Texas named Tracy, and her son took one Percocet that was laced with fentanyl, immediately died. That is happening all across this country because of the poison that they are bringing in. So as president, would I use force? Would I treat them as foreign terrorist organizations? You're darn right I would.
Okay, so we aren't going to, we're too worried about starting a war with Russia that we're not going to fund Ukraine. But we are going to send active military troops across the southern border into Mexico. Talk about potentially starting a war. If the United States sent soldiers, military personnel, into Mexico, you don't think Mexico would respond? There would be some issues? That would create less tension? I mean, that is so absurd. Because he also wouldn't do it. Like, he's not going to send military personnel across another country's border without that country's permission. He's not going to do it. And I also hate this idea that cartels are killing tens of thousands of Americans. Are they? You know, there's a difference between Al-Qaeda literally committing terrorist acts and killing directly Americans. There's a difference between that and Americans taking drugs. Even the awful situation that you mentioned. The cartel didn't force that person to take fentanyl, to take the pill. Like, you can't just declare war on the cartel and invade the country to the south of you because your own people are in such despair and hopelessness that they're taking drugs. You can't actually treat the cartels who I would argue are a terrorist organization in Mexico that the Mexican government should absolutely be handling and treating like a terrorist organization. But the United States treating them as a terrorist organization the same as Al-Qaeda, who flew planes into the World Trade Center, who have committed bombing after bombing against Americans. To equate the two is just, you can't equate the two. And this is, again, I don't understand how you can have isolationism and then this kind of aggressive action towards the South. And then finally, I just thought this was a great question by Martha McCallum, and I think it's a great question to end on because this question is going unanswered by pretty much every Republican. So I'm glad she asked it.
Faith is on decline in this country. You talked about it a little bit before tonight. So is there a role for a president of the United States in changing that? What would you do to change that?
What a great question. Everybody agrees that faith is on decline. Everyone can see the numbers. Okay, what are you going to do about it? What can the president do about it? Nothing. It's a sad reality, but the president of the United States can't renew faith in the hearts of American people. The American president, even instituting policies, will only force people into behavior and not actually create faith in their hearts. There's all this talk about the declining religiosity and the declining faith and belief in God, and it's a problem. But it's a problem that the United States president cannot solve. We can talk about bringing back faith but how? Apart from a genuine spiritual revival, which is not going to come from the president, it's going to come from individual churches. The local church, individual Christians who love and care for one another, who love their neighbor, who look out for their neighbor, who care for their families, who seek the well-being and the prosperity of their family, their community, their country. And it's going to take, at the end of the day, a work of the Holy Spirit. That's just the reality. The Republican Party and Republicans across the country are worried about this, are worried about the decline in faith. And I get it. The solution's not political. It's never going to be political. The solution is spiritual. And the spiritual and the political, when those two things get meshed, it's never gone well. So, as Christians, if we're concerned about the decline in religiosity and in faith in the United States, then we have to make it appealing. And I don't mean appealing by, prosperity gospel nonsense. I mean make it appealing by loving well, by being joyful, by displaying the acts of the fruits of the Spirit, and through displaying the fruits of the Spirit with a smile on our face, people will see they're different, and it's a good different. It's not they don't have sex before marriage. They don't believe in gay marriage. That's not all that there is to it. If you're only known for what you're against, then no one will care about you. No one will care about what you believe. But if you make what you believe appealing, because it, spoiler, is the greatest thing that could ever happen to you, because God is the creator of the universe, the ultimate being who is holy, who is mighty, who is glorious, that when we see him and know him for who he really is, and come to grow in our affection and love for him, that's the greatest thing that could ever happen. So what role is there for the United States president in that? There isn't one. It's on us, Christians, American Christians, local churches, to love well, to glorify God in all that we do, and to do it with a smile on our face, to be joyful in the midst of it. We suffer well, we love well, we care well, we are patient, we're kind, we're caring, we're gentle, we're meek. I mean, we are those things, and that's when, and we pray, and we love the scriptures, and we seek to know God better. And then we pray and we advocate, God, bring revival. That's what's going to change things, not electing a president. No president can change people's hearts. It's not going to happen. So I know I went long this week, but again, I told you, I warned you, this is my Super Bowl. This is what I love. I love doing this. I love debates, criticizing ideas. This is why I started the podcast to begin with. So sorry I went long. Next week I'll be back. So this is the end of the podcast this week. I hope that you like, subscribe, share, do whatever you can to make this podcast go far and wide. And I will hope you return next week to a shorter podcast.